Mass Effect's N7 Day is coming up, and there's a lot of discourse about what we'll get, how important it is, and so on. I wanted to riff a bit on it and give myself a chance to just talk about how important I think this N7 Day is, and to give you all a chance to do the same, and maybe even I'll reply in the comments. Before then, if you like Mass Effect, BioWare, you like following the news, speculation for the next game, consider subscribing to my channel. Hit the like button so more people see it. And if you want to become a YouTube member, get videos like this one a bit early, go ahead and do that. Let's jump into it. So I've seen a real range of people and what they think will happen with this N7 Day and how important it is and so on and so forth. It ranges from people thinking that we're going to get like a release date and this and that, to people thinking we're just going to get a JPEG again, like we did in 2024. So it's not a completely unfounded thing. Since 2020-ish, they've been revealing new information about the upcoming game. It's mostly just been them saying, we're working on it. But there have been teases and trailers and concept art things shown and statements of being in pre-production and prototyping and so on and so forth. Announcements of, who's been hired, directors on the project and stuff like that. Unfortunately, there's also been announcements of layoffs and the studio shrinking and people leaving and so on and so forth as well. What I think right now is that this is probably the most important moment for BioWare in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, because it serves multiple purposes. To the people who think that we're going to get nothing, I mean, maybe we didn't get anything last year. I think the context around it made sense, especially once we found out that the Mass Effect team had been helping the Dragon Age team ship their game, whether they wanted the help or not. That's a different video for a different day. But we found out that, the Mass Effect team, for the most part, just didn't work on Mass Effect for over a year, concluding around the time of Veilguard's launch, which means they really hadn't worked on it much since the summer of 2023, which is funny because 2023 gave us a trailer for N7 Day, even though presumably they had mostly stopped working on the game at that point. Now, I assume that even though they had stopped working on the game in principle, I'm sure they still got days or moments to be able to, continue pushing forward on that project. They've been saying they're in pre-production on Mass Effect. I believe the first mention of that is in 2021. So, 4 years of pre-production, even if you count that year-ish where they weren't working on it, is still quite a while. Not to mention that they just released the game in the last year, and in EA's current situation, be it without or with that acquisition, they probably can't go another 6-7 years without releasing the game. I suspect the timeline for that is shorter. And because of that, I think that with everything going on, that this is a really important N7 Day. I believe they're going to throw out everything they have. And the reason I think that is because this is very likely them trying to do a few things. The main thing is, create hype amongst their community, whether it's the existing BioWare community, Mass Effect community, any Dragon Age stragglers who are still around, even though they're understandably upset about how their preferred franchise is at the very least shelved and possibly worse. So they're trying to pull people back in. And they're doing that for multiple reasons. If they do release this game one day, they want to have people engaged, right? But they also want the people above them or other people in the industry to see hey, look how many people are excited for this thing we're working on that we may not have even started making yet, right? And the reason that's important is a couple of the other things that are going on. Just in general with EA, they want to show EA, hey, we know Andromeda, kind of rough, still sold okay, but kind of rough. Anthem, that whole disaster. Go check out everyone else's great videos about that. And then Veilguard, a game that even EA has said that they were happy with the reception of it, for what that's worth, but unfortunately didn't sell too well. I have to imagine after, selling a few million copies, getting a Game Pass deal, getting a PlayStation Plus deal, and the other things that they've done, I suspect the game has hopefully broken even at least, and hasn't been too much of a stain on BioWare. But when you also see that in the last 2 years, BioWare is half the size it used to be, maybe it didn't do enough. That's a fly on the wall bit of knowledge that I just don't have. The other people they're trying to impress here, I guess, could be the potential acquisition, the new owners, which we assume are going to take over, early, next year and around April, when this proposed acquisition is almost certainly going to go through. They're also kind of likely going to be courting other publishers and other investors to see what can happen. With this acquisition that EA has announced and is very likely going to go through with, they may not necessarily, you know, be only trying to impress the people who currently have them. I still to this day believe that EA retaining BioWare and BioWare being able to continue making games under EA is their best case scenario, even though I know so many people are going to disagree with me because of how EA has mistreated all of the studios that they really have under them, but especially ones that are kind of on the fringe, like it feels like BioWare might be right now. On the other side, I would argue that they've had infinite patience with BioWare, it seems, because if they were any of the other studios EA has shuttered over the years, I think they'd be gone, but for whatever reason they aren't, and I'll be thankful for that. I think people need to realize that, I don't think they're going to hold back anything. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we get everything they can possibly show without getting in trouble, basically. Yeah, I think we're going to see anything and everything they're allowed to show, because either, whether they're trying to impress the fans, impress EA, or impress potential acquisition targets, they have to kind of lay it all out there. There's also this situation where, there's not that many of them there. There's, we assume around 100 people. I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if it's less, after some of the, things I've looked into lately. And, what do they have to lose? We had that Insider Gaming article pop up a few weeks ago after the acquisition was announced to these new investors for EA. And literally the final paragraph of the article was a quote from an anonymous BioWare employee who was like, I have my resume ready, but we're going to keep trucking on this game until we're told to stop. It's not the healthiest way to live. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's just what we're going to do. And I have to imagine that attitude at BioWare probably isn't completely new. It's just likely more serious than it's ever been. And for that reason, like I've said a couple times now, I don't know how big it's going to be. I don't know how much they have to show. I have to imagine in 4 years of pre-production, and especially very likely grinding out pretty hard over the last year, working on this next game. I mean, if they were prototyping back in 2021, surely we have some vertical slices, maybe some gameplay, at least some really basic stuff they can show off. I think people often don't realize how quickly games come together at the end. So say the game is 2 years away, 3 years away, it is probably still a framework at this point. And so much of that happens so quickly in the final days. Even thinking about Veilguard, people think of Veilguard as going back to, 2018, 2019. But Veilguard, there were essentially like 2 or 3 different games that were made. There was the initial project that, essentially got canceled. And I'm sure they brought some assets over to another version of what was going to be the next Dragon Age. And from what I have heard and read, that got essentially canceled as well. And then what became Veilguard only really started about 2.5 years ago. There's a full production announcement from, I believe it's 2022 is when they announced full production. And that came out in end of 2024. That was only about 2.5 years. And while the carryover from those previous projects almost certainly helped, I'm sure there were assets that were built already, storylines and dialogue, and I'm sure things got carried over, and that may have been part of the problem with Veilguard, but that's a different video. They made that game in 2 years, essentially. And the target was to release it, 6 to 12 months earlier than they did. So there was even a target at one point to release that game in like less than 2 years, potentially internally. They never announced that externally, but that was rumored by Jeff Grubb and Tom Henderson and some others over the years. So with all that babbling and all that talking, if this N7 Day is just a JPEG or just a little blog with almost literally nothing to show, I would worry, because that would tell me that they just didn't have anything to show. If it's some big blowout where we see a bunch of concept art, another teaser trailer, maybe some more specific things, hell, maybe even a title, even though after the Dreadwolf Veilguard thing, they may not announce a title until like a month before this game would potentially release. But I digress. I think it's going to be big, and I think it kind of has to be. And that could, and I think that's for so many reasons. I think they're going to try to impress us, the fans. I think they're going to try to show EA they've got the juice, and hopefully the fans are there for it as well. And if all else fails, this is likely going to be a sales pitch for them to Xbox, PlayStation, Amazon, whoever's looking to get into potentially bringing a AAA studio like this and its IP under their wing. If EA isn't going to keep it in the next year or so, we'll just have to wait and see. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Let me know what you think this is going to be, how important it really is. If you just say that they're dead and it's gone, and I'm probably going to ignore that. I'm going to be totally honest. But if you have your own thoughts, I would love to read them, and I will respond in due course. If you care about Mass Effect, BioWare, speculating about this stuff and talking about it, consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the like button so more fans see it and we can all have a big discussion. If you want videos like this one just a bit early, you can become a YouTube member where you get that and some other perks as well. Check out the links in the description of the video for my other content and for other ways you can support what I'm doing here. That is all I have for this one. So until next time.